So my background, just to cut to the chase, I effectively actually an engineer. I'm a telecoms engineer way back. And there's been a journey in that angle. And I think most of that journey has been looking around the hourglass. What's happening? What are the industry trends that are happening in multiple sectors? And I've transgressed through that over time. So most recently, obviously, I headed up Visa's Innovation Strategic Partnership Group, fintech strategy, venture strategy. And the innovation angle was very exciting because around that we had the pleasure of working very closely with a lot of the banks in the market, but also engaging pretty closely with central banks. But I've also at heart, when I finished my degree way back, I actually created a startup. And so that entrepreneurial DNA was always there. And that was a software startup back then. I sort of transgressed through there and had an opportunity to do a management buyout at Vodafone. And that was to essentially acquire a Global Star business unit. Again, transgressed through the whole venture space. What I'm saying here is that through the course of that sort of journey, you go through multiple pivot points. And I think the key is to carry three traits. One is you got to have a change mindset. One is to expect change in your industry, and that's happening right now in the financial sector, and we'll talk a lot more about it. But also embrace it. Embrace it because then you can move the market forward. Second thing is really having an entrepreneurial approach. I think us as leaders, we are effectively in charge of multiple different, either a business unit or in most cases CEOs of companies, behave like entrepreneurs. I mean, they're accountable to shareholders, they're accountable to investors, and they're looking to drive revenue growth. So you've got to behave in that way, and I think at the end of the day, that infuses through the organization. And then thirdly, and probably the most important, is carrying an innovation DNA. I think we all, as human beings, we're problem solvers. And so our DNA is to solve problems. And be it that in our existing roles, or be that in our industry, we've got to be looking forward to solve that. And I think that's the journey that you've got to go through. And that's the journey I've been going through.
What are the major trends and themes in the fintech space that are happening globally and then regionally?
Yeah, it's an exciting area. If I sort of look at the world today and I look at where things are moving, so undoubtedly mobile tech is a big focus, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. But let's think of it from not only a payments perspective, but think of what's happening there. Think of rideshare providers who are now immersing into the fintech space. If you look at Grab in Southeast Asia, they've evolved from just being effectively an Uber of the region to now offering financial services. So mobile tech, absolutely. I think digital banking online is a big trend, and I think that's evolving. Obviously, Revolut is the prime example of that. And obviously, there'll be a lot of discussions around this through the course of the day. You can't ignore the fact that biometrics is going to come into this field, and I think that's going to evolve around authentication services, be that through mobile or be that through various different aspects of merchant interaction. Then you've got two other areas. One is around blockchain, and we're seeing obviously what's happening there with Facebook's announcement. We cannot ignore that announcement. I think we've got to think about where and what impact that'll provide and what opportunity that'll provide to the financial inclusion space. Lastly is AI. Ultimately, we've got 3.5 billion people that are currently online, or 4 billion people that are online. Think of the impact that's having in terms of data generation. Think of what that's going to do in terms of interaction for us as an industry. I'll share a simple experience. I mean, my dad is in his early 80s. He's never held a mobile phone up until 9 months ago. In fact, didn't even know how to make probably a phone call through that. But he was given a phone and he was taught to use YouTube and he was taught to use WhatsApp. He's an avid user now. That's an elderly aged person. There's no reason why they can't be financially included as well. That elderly consumer is also probably where most of the wealth sits today. You know, we all talk about millennials, but millennials are coming through the ranks. The reality is the assets today are still sitting with Gen X. Yeah. And so how do you keep them included and engaged in the economy? You need to be out there having some access points. Doesn't necessarily mean you're going to overly expand, but they can be services such as maybe you can issue debit cards or credit cards in branch immediately. Maybe they can get the direct video type of service in branch to to help them through certain transaction experiences. There'll still be a role to play. And then slowly hybrid, using a hybrid model, move them towards the mobile experiences. Because ultimately it's going to be built around experiences.